here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's September 22nd here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yoon.
Good morning, and Park Ki-hoon.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, a KF-16 fighter jet crashed while taking off for a daily mission in Seosan, Chungcheongnam-do province. According to the Korean Air Force, the pilot aboard safely escaped in time and has been transferred to the hospital. No civilian casualties were reported either because the jet crashed within the base. Moving on to our second news. Great news if you're a foreigner planning to visit Incheon International Airport this weekend. The first 500 will be able to get a public transport card with a Korean name printed on them for free. All you need to do is participate in a survey on Korean tourism at a designated kiosk at the tourist center of the airport lobby. The Ministry of Culture has decided to hold this event to encourage more foreigners to visit Korea and also to promote the Korean language. Moving on to our last news, South Korea's phone market seems to be getting pricier day by day. Industry analysts on Wednesday found out that specifically Apple phones have risen in price over the past 10 years. Particularly, the iPhone XS released in 2018 saw a 21.5% jump in price here in Korea compared to its previous model. The problem raised by analysts, though, was that Apple products in Korea had the most severe price hike compared to neighboring countries like Japan and China. Samsung phones, on the other hand, were much more affordable and cheap, up to $746 cheaper than the States, UK, and France. And we're hearing this news just weeks ahead of Apple's plan to release its new iPhone 15 series. Local media outlets believe that the new model may hit the Korean market in early October. Apple has declined to make an official statement, and we're yet to see how much these phones will cost. But as much as young consumers, specifically Millennials and Gen Z, have a high preference for Apple products here in Korea, attention is geared as to whether they buy despite this so-called phoneFlation. So here in the studio, are you guys a big fan of electronics, or do you guys frequently change your phones? And have you or your friends felt this type of phoneFlation recently?
You know, I have a few friends who are huge Apple fans,
Right.
and they already pre-ordered the Apple iPhone 15. Yeah,
really?
and I asked them how much was it, and it was almost like 2 million won, which was super pricey.
Yum.
I wouldn't pay that much for a phone because I'm a Samsung man. I've been only using Samsung phones the rest of my life. I do understand why like so many youngsters like phones, because I think iPhones have maybe or maybe not better quality cameras, and it's all about, you know, uploading things on SNS,
Right.
a lot of videos. You have a lot of YouTubers as well, influencers, and they need to take that good, high quality videos and of
Right.
course pictures, which I understand, but everything else, you know, inflation is really hitting us hard, and we're experiencing phoneFlation now, so I really want to avoid that, and I want to stay loyal to my Samsung.
I know, and that's a really affordable option for you because, as we mentioned just now, it's affordable to buy Samsung phones in Korea.
yeah.
What about you, Ji-hee?
Well, I'm not someone who frequently updates my phones, and like Ki-hoon, I'm also a big fan of Samsung's Galaxy. But I do have friends who are big Apple Apple fans, and they like to change their phones to the latest version.
Right.
But like Ki-hoon said, they're very pricey, and I thought some of the Samsung models, the latest models, they are also quite expensive.
Yeah.
But Apple models are a lot more expensive, right? And I think it's a little too excessive. And sometimes these phones cost as much as laptops.
Exactly.
Which really is a lot for this little device. Although we can do a lot on this device like we do on laptops, I still think it's a little too much.
Exactly, though it's a necessity in our daily lives. Nowadays, you can't go around without a phone.
Exactly.
But then it's just costing us way too much. And speaking of rising costs in other parts of our lives, especially for food, now to see phoneFlation, it's a little burdensome for our generation. And that was our news feed for this Friday. Let's now head into our discussion topic. Autumn in Korea is known as the season for reading. That's why today we'll be discussing what and how our generation likes to read. Living in a digital age, ebooks and online libraries have found their place in Korean reading culture, especially among tech-savvy millennials and Gen Z. Despite going through the hustle and bustle of life, Young Koreans are turning to their smartphones to turn the page of knowledge. They're also using books as a way to network or build more relationships. As I've mentioned before, autumn in Korea is a season dedicated to reading books. So here in the studio, do you guys often read books? If so, do you guys prefer paper books or ebooks?
To answer your first question, I was never a really big fan of reading until I actually started teaching English here in Korea to elementary school students. And I told them I was forcing it right into them. Read, read, read. If you want to become smarter, if you want to learn English better. And then I was thinking to myself, I'm not a reader either. So I felt like a hypocrite. So I started to practice what I preach. And I somehow got into a habit of reading at a late age, which was a big achievement for me, and it was very difficult.
Age doesn't matter too.
Thank you, Gigi.
But then I think it's easier to start when you're young, but for you to have done that as an adult.
I picked it up, and once I started actually reading properly, I would read, I guess, once every 2 to 3 days.
Oh.
And not so much ebooks, but I like the conventional way of reading because I like the smell of the paper. And not just that, like every time I turn the page, the sound it makes.
Yeah.
And also, I can really concentrate when I read paper books. Whereas if I would be reading ebooks on my smartphone or my tablet PC, I'll get easily distracted because if you're in front of the screen, you immediately want to do something else, turn on YouTube, chat with your friends. So I think for me, reading is the paper books is the way to go for me.
Paper books are the way to go. You like to keep it old school.
Yes.
All right. What about you, Chi?
Well, the first question, how frequently do I read? I try to read like twice a week.
You guys are both heavy readers, in my opinion.
No, we're not, but I'm not an extensive reader. We try. Like, I spend some time reading books, although it could be just 15 to 30 minutes. I try to keep that habit because it really helps to organize your thoughts if you have a lot going on in your life, or it just really helps. But unlike Ki-hoon, I really like reading through ebooks, and I have one ebook here with me. It's really light, first of all.
And it's quite small.
It's really small, and it's like Ki-hoon said, if you use other devices like phones or tablet PCs, you have a lot of distractions, right? But this one, it's just for books, and you can have multiple books in one device. And I personally like reading multiple books at the same time. So I really like these ebooks, but at the same time, if I really want to keep a paperback version, if I really like the book, I also buy a paper version.
Oh, I see.
Yes, I initially read this on an ebook, but I really liked it and I wanted to keep it and read it again, like a Bible. So I bought this. So I really like reading both, but I prefer ebooks. If I want to keep them, paperbacks.
No, it's quite impressive that you guys are trying to make reading a daily habit because actually in 2021, when they did a survey, it turns out that the average Korean only reads around 4.5 books per year. And 52.5% of the population doesn't even finish a full book within a whole year. And I'm also guilty of that. Though I try to start reading a book, I can't finish it. But as you mentioned, there's so many options now. We're now seeing online reading becoming a trend. And another very interesting part of the survey was that among the whole age group of the population, those in their 20s started reading a bit more.
Exactly, that's right.
So, and I think that's the advent of technology, right?
Exactly, it really is. And there are a lot of ebook platforms these days as well. And like you said, there are so many forms and ways to read and enjoy books. And as you can see on the screen, it's not just paperbacks, but these ebooks, audiobooks, webtoons, the subscription services are easily provided and accessible. And Millie's Library is a Korean ebook platform. It has accumulated 6 million members, and 60% of the total members are in their 20s and 30s. So millennials and Gen Z prefer using audiobooks and mobile platforms for reading. And of course, these options are very convenient and readily available, especially during commutes, because you have a lot of time to kill when you're on buses or subways. And they enjoy engaging in these different content like realistic, captivating stories. And they also like the radio dramas as well, although it's a little different from reading personally, I think. And audiobooks, they offer you the benefit of multitasking as well. That's what young people believe. But I also is not a strong believer of multitasking while you're reading, because you really have to concentrate on the reading to be able to absorb that content properly.
But as you mentioned, because we are the thumb generation, we're so used to digital devices, I think ebooks are allowing more youngsters to read, right, Ki-hoon?
Absolutely. There's an online platform called Book Club where you pay a small monthly fee and you have unlimited access to ebooks and you can read multiple books in one go. And there's even an online community channel where you can share your thoughts after reading and even like mini challenges to finish one single book, chosen book within a time frame. And also there are even apps that help you become better readers. So ultimately, I think it's trying to encourage more people to read on a regular basis. And it's, I think, amazing to see how technology makes the whole concept of reading a lot more convenient and accessible. But at the same time, I feel that many students and young people may have taken the easy way to acquire the skill of reading.
Right.
And there was a case study that showed where younger generation people have lower literacy skills compared to the older generation. And I think it's partly due to the pandemic as well, where they were so exposed to the screen, not so much in a proper reading, just a lot of media and a lot of just visuals and videos and whatnot. So I think ebooks can become very beneficial and if to everyone actually, only if utilized properly and effectively.
Yeah, that's the key to go. And Chi-hee, I know you've also been to a book club, right? Can you tell us your experience about that?
I did. I actually went to a physical place to read together with other people. The benefit of that was you really become involved in that atmosphere. People are all concentrating on their own books, whether it be ebooks or paperbacks. You can hear them flipping the pages. And it really motivates you to be in that moment with other people.
Exactly, and that brings me to my next point, which is the environment you're in is so important when you're reading. You need to be really hyper-focused, and that's why a lot of people in our generation really prioritize the location. So are there any specific places that seem to be popular among young people who want to read?
Well, other than the typical cafes, which Ki-hoon will explain about in more detail, we have a lot of outdoor public spaces that are dedicated to reading as well. I mean, the benefits of reading, as we all know, is huge, and that is why reading is encouraged among the people. And local authorities, they're starting to, and they have started to install these places that are suitable for reading outdoors. So you can be just out on these gardens or these city hall places in front of the city hall where there are bean bags and benches for you to read. So it's a mixture of nature and reading at the same time. Some people really like that white noise while they're reading, right? So I think it's really, and you can read by the Han River as well. So this is a really new trend among the young people.
And as we mentioned, autumn is the best time for reading because autumn's in Korea. There's perfect weather. The skies are high. You can hear the wind breezing. So I think it's really nice if people want to go outdoors and start reading with a friend. Could you introduce any more places that we love to read at?
Yeah, to give more details on book cafes, if you go to these cafes, there are fancy, like large bookshelves with all these different types of books, and it's very well displayed. So while you're ordering your favorite drink at a cafe, you can also pick out a random book that you want to read for hours and hours. And of course, the environment itself is very quiet, which helps you to really focus on the book you're actually reading. But I think it's quite interesting to note that a lot of the younger people, they put a lot of emphasis on where they read and what kind of environment, and also like who they read with as well. But with me being the millennial on the older side, being a little old school, I see a lot of older people as well just read on the go, like in subways, in beaches, or by the swimming pool while they're on vacation. So it's kind of like, it's very different at how things have changed, because I don't see many kids reading in subways because
they're always on their phone.
Yeah, they're always on their phone. And even if they're on their phone reading ebooks, I'm not quite sure if they're fully concentrating on the books itself. They're probably doing like multiple things at the same time.
But you mentioned a really good point. I think the new reading culture amongst our generation is that we're quite picky with where we're reading and how we're showing people that we're reading. Because we do have a tendency to often upload it on our Instagram, say, hey, I read this book. It could be sometimes to share the moral of the story, but also the fact that I'm actually reading. And let's find out what the reading scene is like in other parts of the world by looking at what our global viewers had to say on today's topic. Take a look look at the screen to find out what 3 said. And Mola Gurwal said got a Kobo Ellipsa e-reader last year, and it was a great purchase. You have to see it in person to appreciate it. Can read on it for hours just like on paper, but minus the weight. Hannah Hirano said there's something special about physical books that ebooks just can't replicate. The rustle of pages being turned, the weight of the book gives me a reading pleasure that's hard to beat. Doni Yori said, I love reading mostly printed books, but I don't have the opportunity to always have them, so sometimes I read them on my Kindle. I'm very happy to hear that a lot of our viewers love reading, whether it be on ebooks or physical books. But now we're going to include a fellow millennial from the States in our talks to find out about the reading trends there. Let's now include a fellow millennial studying literature at New York University in our talks. It's Jishuen Yang. Welcome.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Jishuen. So I'd like to ask you the first question. How frequently do millennials and Gen Z in the States read books? And you heard our discussion so far. Is reading common there compared to here in Korea or other parts of the world?
I actually had read an article on this. I think it was the Forbes magazine, and they did a survey on Gen Z's reading habit in 2020, and the results shows that after COVID, and because during the pandemic, people were starting to read more. So afterwards, it's 55% of Gen Z actually started to read every week, and 40% read daily. And personally, I find that statistic to be very surprising, and I'm not sure how correct it is, but at least here in New York City, I would always see people reading a book on the subway, and they're all like very relatively young. So I think, it is pretty common, and especially for the younger generations, we're really starting to read more nowadays. But as to how that might compare to other parts of the world, I'm not really sure.
But we are seeing a global increase of people reading, especially in New York City. That's quite interesting to hear. The second question, please.
So we've mentioned how online libraries and audiobook cafes are popular here in Korea. Is there any distinctive reading culture that's been building up in the States these days?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So there are all kinds of digital libraries and digital archives in the States. And it's not just the States, where I'm from, which is Shanghai, China. We have like lots of book cafes because, when the traditional bookstore started to kind of dying out, people really turned to this new way of selling books, with the side of coffee. And they also host like different reading events like book clubs and stuff, which is really fun for young people as well. And I guess for like audiobooks, it's really started to gaining a lot of popularity, and more platforms, even publishing houses, are starting to come up with audiobooks for their readers, which can be very, very helpful for people who just don't have that many time to really sit down and read a book.
Right. As a literature major, you must read a lot for your studies. Any tips on becoming a better reader, or just picking up reading as a habit?
I think I would say the most important thing for me is that you should always enjoy reading, and reading should always be fun. It shouldn't feel like a task that you have to complete. And it's not really about how many books you read or even what kind of books you read. It's about enjoying the process of reading and finding books that you can get excited about, that you can love and relate to, which is, I think, more important than anything else.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think we can all relate there. We find reading to be an arduous assignment sometimes. We feel pressure to finish it or read as much books as our peers or colleagues. But I think the bigger message is try doing it easy, take it step by step, and just enjoy the process, right?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, Yishuan. It was a pleasure having you here in our studio today.
So much. It's a pleasure to be here. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. And moving on towards our latter part of the discussion, you guys are the designated bookworms of the NewsGen panelists. So any reading tips of your own that you would like to share with either, me and Ki-hoon or our viewers out there?
Well, I'm quite embarrassed to hear that title for us, the bookworms, because to be honest, I'm not like an extensive reader, although I try to read and I do read. My tip would be, like we've mentioned earlier in our discussions, there are a lot of distractions these days, like the devices and the background, and people just find it really hard to concentrate on one content. So my tip for you would be, and I use this myself as well, I have the hourglasses or sand glasses that I use while reading. So I have the 15-minute one and the 30-minute one. So while I'm reading, I would just flip that and just focus on the content that I'm reading without my phone or any other electronic devices. And it really helps you to keep you in that moment.
Really?
And if this experience builds up, you gain that muscle for reading, and it makes it easier and more enjoyable to read.
You're training your book muscles.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Ki-hoon, any tips you'd like to give us or our viewers?
I mean, trying to get into a habit of reading is, I think, key. Getting into a good or bad habit takes a lot of time and effort,
does.
but once you get into that habit, it becomes very second nature and it just becomes part of your life. And to end, I would like to finish with a quote. Quote, the 33rd President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, once said, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers."
That is really nice. All leaders are
Are readers.
readers. Okay, that's a little bit of a tongue twister there.
It
but
is.
The moral of the day is reading could be helpful for you, and trying to make it a daily habit, take it step by step. In the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chiji Hee.
Thank you.
And Park
Thanks
Ki-hoon.
for having me.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. We are News Generation.